actually mobile technology is doing exactly that. It's bringing this spiritual notion to the very worldly or virtual worldly experience of connecting very rural areas with the whole world in a simultaneous or directly online way. So we are actually interconnecting the human world with mobile technology. So this is a tremendous development which has taken place in the last 10, 15 years. So that nowadays when you go to these remote valleys, you see very, very simple accommodation, very, very simple basic like housing, basic fooding, basic living. And at the same time, you see a collection of mobile phones and tablets lying on the kitchen table. So people are simultaneously in their very traditional, still largely self-subsistent mode of living, and at the same time they're connected to the world, to Facebook, to YouTube, to the complete range of news and whatever mobile technology has to offer. So today is, in this panel, we would like to shed light on this potential of mobile technology in creating concrete solutions to current development challenges, and paving the way for connected development of Himalayan spaces. So I would like to ask Robin to introduce us to this very wide scope of what mobile technology can offer us in development of local rural areas. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. So we're talking about connecting spaces. I want to ask a question to the audience. How many bank branches or touch point, let's say sub-offices, are there in Nepal? Who thinks it's more than 500? More than 500 banks in the country, right? Who thinks it's more than 5,000? Who thinks it's around, well, I'll give you the answer, let's not. It's around 7,000 touch points. So points where you can go and get a banking. But clearly they're more in the urban areas, then it's easy to get a bank here around the corner than it would be in the Himalaya. Another fun fact, the highest ATM machine is at 5 kilometers high. It's in India, and it needs a special cooler just to keep it keep it afloat in the summer, and it needs a special heater just to keep it afloat in the winter. But now another question, how many cell phones are there? 27 million. How many, sorry? 27 million. 27 million, yeah, that's actually quite close. 32 million, we came with a rough estimation. So for the first time last year, we have more cell phones than people in Nepal. And that has been happening all in 9 years' time. Since 2006, that's when growth started from 3% and now to 120%. That's a very, very rapid product launch. And if you think about it, I mean, even the iPhone has just celebrated its 10 years anniversary. At that time, we could, for the first time, swipe our phones. It was really nice, right? We could make a swipe and then, oh, look, cool, we can touch the screen. But nowadays we can do navigation, we can do, we make pictures, we have our lives on these things. It's personal information. Here's a picture of my family. Another thing that they can do clearly is mobile banking. And this is where the United Nations Capital Development Fund has been working a lot on in the last 10 years. Basically, the UNCDF, as with the UN, I believe we're quite well suited to connect people in this policy spaces, countries to create partnerships between public and private sector. And that's something that UNCDF has been doing. I myself work at the regional office as a data management specialist in Bangkok, where we work a lot with ASEAN, but also here with SAARC. So we're active in, we've got a special mandate to work with least developed nations. We're working with Nepal, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, but also with some of the other countries, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, both with the regulators as well as with the private sector. And it used to be 10 years ago we worked a lot with microfinance institutions. We still do, in fact, here in Nepal. But nowadays there's also telco companies which are doing mobile money. There's fintech solutions coming from Singapore, coming from Malaysia, coming from India and China. And there's also mobile money operators and the traditional banks, of course. So can we set up partnerships is one of the things that we have worked quite a bit on. As well as on the regulation space. Because when something grows from 4% of the population to 120% of the population, there comes this question, do we need to regulate it? When we think about the fast pace that mobile money is growing, we now got 500 million people with a mobile money account worldwide, but 100 million of them were just added in the last year. So it's an explosive, really rapid growth happening. In Nepal, 61% of the population has access to some sort of formal finance. 39% of the population still remains excluded. And who are the people who don't have access to savings, credit, and other insurance products, etc.? Those are particularly people in rural areas, particularly youth is a very important group of people that are being excluded. Generally in South Asia and also in Nepal, women have lower access to finance. And 1% to 2% of the people now have access to mobile money. Among some of the things that we've done in Nepal, and then I'm going to give the mic to somebody else, but among some of the things that we've done is, for example, working on branchless banking, which is trying to connect technology to the local context. For example, offering agricultural loans that are suitable for the value chain, but also financial literacy. We've trained 15,000 people here in Nepal on financial literacy. Another thing that we've done is we have offered support to EMI, on launching the first wallet in the country. They're now free regulated savings wallets. And 6 months ago that one was launched, and it now has 70,000 people who access that app for mobile money. So yeah, Nepal is getting into the mood of mobile money, if you like.
Thank you, Robin, for this very comprehensive introduction to the topic. Let's now move to a very concrete example of where mobile technology is addressing a topic of high relevance in Nepal. Giuseppe, please, how does new technology help protect the rights of migrant workers?
Thank you very much, first of all, for having invited me here for the first time. We don't have much time, so I'll go straight to the point. Before talking about the solutions that we are in a verge of bringing to the population, the most exposed population of Nepal, I'm referring to the migrants. I would like to set migration into a bigger scope. So we were talking about in previous panels, we were talking about the impact of climate on and displacement of people. Now, what's going on right now at the level of at the planetary level is that we have 258 million of migrants, and they remit something like $413 billion yearly. Now, how does this impact the SDGs? We've noticed that thanks to migration, the condition of those people in Nepal, namely, has been improved. So the Human Development Index has been improved, but all this came at a cost. We noticed, so when we talk about migration, indeed, migration mobility, it makes sense, and it makes sense to talk about migration and mobility within this context. So what kind of hurdles migrants come across? Exactly the same hurdles to which you were referring to. So these people, first of all, when they leave the countries, whether it is in Bangladesh, or whether it is out of Nepal, they face, first of all, a lack of information. Information is paper-driven, if there is any. There's absolutely no factual information about the possibilities of employment abroad. Basically, this will be a field of development. And by the way, I'm just referring to something. IOM has just launched an application. It's recent. It's called the Migration App. It's the beginning of something, but it is the beginning of something that addresses particularly the migrant. In this region, South Asia, there are 40 to 50 million migrants who go to the Gulf countries. And they bring in 123 billion of US dollars or remittances. So the problem here that we try to address is how do you bring these remittances back home? And by doing this, reach one of the SDG goals, which is to reduce the cost of remittances below 3%. Now, how do you do this? you could say, well, these apps, this technology is ready-made, but regulations, indeed, regulations can be hindering all this kind of possibilities. I would like to start with my first example. In the Gulf countries, many people have been criticizing, and rightfully so, the way the Gulf countries were managing the influx of migration. So thanks to the, let's say, pressure that has been put on these countries, there's been one positive outcome. And this positive outcome was the wage protection scheme that was first started by the Emirates. Now, wage protection scheme, what is it? It's a regulation that has been adopted by all the rest of the Gulf countries that makes it compulsory for the employers to pay their money, to pay the salaries actually to their employees on a card, on a debit card. But this card comes with an e-wallet. That e-wallet allows the migrants to remit or just to pay and live within the countries of destination and remit to the countries of origin. So this is one concrete example that has been applied since 2009, and now it is upscaled within the Gulf countries, where you stop me, to address what? First of all, underprivileged population, the migrants, skilled, unskilled. These are the people we're talking about. They constitute the majority of the people who migrate. They addressed a very, very important point that was wage retention, directly linked to bondage labor. So what was one of the practice of the employers? They were saying, I'm paying cash in hand, and then at the end of the month, they were just keeping the money, obliging the migrants to keep on and pushing them even to become illegal migrants. So this is one of this digitization, this mobile banking has been answering and bringing a solution, for instance, this very, very important point. Then you can make employers accountable. So you can say, you haven't paid me. So they are accountable. And it is the Ministry of Labor and the central bank of these countries that is vouching for this. It has reduced the involvement of physical cash. So you don't pay cash in hand. It addresses what we're trying to do here. I mean, we reduce the usage of cash, and by doing this, by introducing the e-wallet, we reduce the cost of remitting. To give you an idea, since this has been introduced in the Gulf countries, the cost of remittances has been dropping substantially, so it ranges between 1 to, let's say, 3.5%. The target of of the World Bank is to bring it down by 5%. The target of the SDG 10C is to reduce it below 3%. So we are there when it comes to this kind of corridor, and this is I think, a concrete solution that implies, first of all, you were talking about regulation first, understanding what migrants need, what a situation need, how a situation should be addressed, and then use the technology that is available.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. That was a wonderful introduction or presentation of the scope of mobile technology in this whole field of migrant working. I would like now to pass to Amuda. You have developed an app-based violence reporting tool called NIDAR, which shows that mobile technology is not only about financial service or financially related services. So could you please explain to us first a little bit what the tool does, and also relate your experience with implementing the tool? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Monika. So it's really wonderful to hear about what mobile technology or technology can do at a macro level in terms of transferring money, e-banking, payment portals, and all of that stuff. But I think technology has also been a very powerful tool in addressing social issues, like issues of gender-based violence and economic empowerment. So with the organization that I work and with the support of Australian Embassy, we devised an app called NIDAR, which is a reporting tool to report gender-based violence from anywhere in Nepal. So now this not only gives access to women who would otherwise be stigmatized to report these things, but also access to information, developing that agency within themselves to speak up about things that is otherwise not spoken. So on a very micro level, it's also an empowering tool, and it also gives that confidence. So when we look at these group of women who now have cell phones, which is now driven by the remittance money, it's very wonderful to see how they're not only connecting on social platforms, but also are being able to privately put out their concerns and issues out there. So the other thing that we can also look at in terms of community and social renaissance that is going on with the technology is Toodle. It's like an Uber. It's a scooty ride where people have now accessibility and mobility. So those people who do not own a vehicle now can have a vehicle to go from one part of town to the other. So, like, if you ask in terms of like how we look at this from a gender perspective, women do not have access to a lot of things. There's a curfew. We have to be home by a certain time. And a lot of us do not have access to finances, which means that we do not own vehicles. But now having this tool where we can order a ride from our cell phones is quite instrumental in providing us that accessibility. Talk about online newspapers and media portals where we can talk about and read about these newspapers, create movements across the country. That's quite powerful when we do not have those enough spaces to talk about these things. So we can look at technology also as an empowerment tool of creating movements across the country, not only across the country, across the globe. If you look at March movement that happened recently, that happened on the same day all over the world. And that's quite powerful. And it's not like everybody was in one place planning it. It was just done through social media and social platforms. So from a gender perspective, it's not only a tool of economic empowerment, which is, and it is also diluting borders and how we look at boundaries and borders and geographical spaces, but it's also about how we're using this tool to have social connections. Literally, in very true meaning, connecting spaces and connecting individuals, not only in country, but also internationally. And that's very powerful. So I think that is what mobile technology has done, and especially in a country like ours where these issues are heavily stigmatized, we can't talk about it, accessibility to information has always been an issue. It acts as an agency to foster that. And that's quite powerful to see, and how far along we've come in that. And maybe there is going to be a question that, oh, but not everybody, especially if you go to the rural areas, there's not going to be cell phones, and people will not have access to the internet. But thanks to the remittance money, you know, and the foreign labor migration, that's one of the many good things it's brought, is also access to technology and access to finances. So these women who are staying back now have access to these technologies where they're connecting to their spouses and partners and families over cell phones, but are also using this for empowerment in many different ways. That is that might not be very tangible to see. But if you look at not the bottom of the iceberg, you actually see what has it done in terms of building self-esteem, confidence, having access to information, and in so many ways like voicing your opinion. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Amuda. That was a very inspiring and passionate pro-mobile technology input. I would like to move to yet another field and give the floor back to Robin. We have been talking about renewable energies, financing mechanisms during diverse panels in today and yesterday. You have another option of financing or giving access to renewable energies to remote areas. Please, Robin.
Yeah, so and that comes back to the previous point. Like, you can have technology, but the role that we see as a UN agency is how can we tailor that technology for sustainable development goals. So this was an excellent example of how it can contribute to gender. This actually was also an excellent example of how it can contribute to gender, because the majority of remittance recipients are women. In most Asian countries, including Nepal. What we have also done, and I'll give you some examples on the women empowerment later, but what we have also done in UNCDF is can we connect mobile money to energy finance? We all know the solar lights, right? The more renewable energy lights. The solar lamps, they used to cost $20. Nowadays, they can even be produced for $8. But there's also much bigger systems which are available, which can charge TVs. They can charge the clean cook stoves. So all these off-grid solar products, and we just heard in the previous panel, which was a remarkable statistics, 2/3 of the household energy need is cooking and lighting in Nepal. So how do we offer larger products to people who are on very low income? How can we offer them a $200 product that can charge their TVs and that can charge multiple applications in their house, and not just one light but 4 or 5 lights? So we have a Clean Start program in UNCDF, which has been launched 4 or 5 years ago. We already sold 130,000 of these solar lamps in Nepal through microfinance agencies, because you need to have a financing component to that. Otherwise, you're not going to reach the outskirts and the most rural and the most last mile people. But there's also opportunities arising now in the field of digital finance. It takes it a step further. In East Africa, these are very popular PAYGO systems. So just like you have a prescription on your phone, you can have a prescription on a cook stove, on a solar lamp. And that means 2 things. One is the device can be switched off remotely in the case that a person doesn't pay back the money anymore. And yeah, if my internet gets switched off, I go quickly back to the store and I pay my internet prescription. This is the same effect that's happening with the energy provision in East Africa, in Uganda and Kenya, for example. But the other thing that it allows much more flexible payment schedules, because you can pay these things back through mobile money. And those can be very small amounts. It can be $2, $3, $4. It can be one time $50. We have seen people who give these products to their families in Uganda. And what's quite interesting, one of the Clean Start partners in Nepal, JBS, has started launching these types of product last year and is piloting this in Nepal, which can move us away from just these 20-watt lamps to much higher, larger systems, and potentially also to, for example, there are these devices that have water drills that can go 100 meter deep, and which can be financed through the PAYGO systems as well. So it enables a lower income. And there's 2 things that we have done. We've done a study in Nepal and in Uganda. Study in Nepal shows that actually people, the 1,800 people that we interviewed, do switch to more modern fuels. So there's a substitution effect to more positive forms of energy. But the other thing that we found in Uganda is that this energy ladder, where you would expect people to start with small products, is actually not happening. They go straight up to the larger products because it's now financeable for them. It's payable for them. So that might be something for Nepal to do in the next couple of years. That's one. I can leave the...
Okay, thank you, Robin. That really is an interesting, promising approach. Let's hope that continues in a way as you lined it out. I'd like to, Giuseppe, I would like to move a little bit also to the question of challenges. Like, this all sounds like really indeed Shangri-La, like we just go ahead with mobile technology and everything will be solved. Based on your experience and on also your plans, the plans you have in stock, what would be challenges you could point out to us, just briefly, 2-3 minutes?
So I'll use Nepal as an example. Together with IOM, what we're doing now, we're trying to achieve what has been achieved in other contexts. What happened when we talk about mobility? We brought the final product at your doorstep, basically. Going back to migration, because this is what we're talking about. Migration here, all the process to migrate in Nepal was Kathmandu Valley centric. Now in the new context, the federal context, one of the biggest challenge will be, we always propose to, but maybe this is an opportunity more than a challenge. What we would like to do is through this mobile technology, or anyway IT technology, will bring the services that would increase the migrants' mobility, and I'll explain what I mean. Instead of sending someone from the province 2, so the southeastern province, we were talking about mobility just before, it takes a day, maybe a day and a half to go to Kathmandu, to do all the paperwork, to go to the manpower agency, just to fulfill all the things, all the paperwork. Go there for your pre-departure orientation. Basically, to make it's a long list of administrative work that the migrant is facing, and he has to move from wherever he is, the most isolated parts, as you were saying. So one project that we're promoting together with the Department of Foreign Employment and the Minister and the Foreign Employment Promotion Board here, this is what we're doing right now. We're implementing it. We asked the Department of Foreign Employment to make available through a database, so we go to digital world here, through a database, all the factual, the real information that the government has about the foreign employment abroad. This information will be made available to what we call migrant resource centers, so points of contacts, distributed in the country of Nepal. There are 45 migration resource centers which are managed by the government, and I think 19 which are managed by 18 which are managed by SAMI Helvetas. So what we are trying to do by doing this is really to develop a complete different dialogue with the migrants. First of all, we reduce the costs of migration by preventing those people to pay for the transportation and the paperwork in Nepal. Secondly, once these people are facing, let's say, a counselor in this migrant resource center, we'll be able to provide them with some information, again, that will reduce the cost and maybe, as you say, make their increase or make them reduce the need to move. So we will say, don't try to migrate where the middleman has told you to go, because he's been cheating you, he's been telling you stories. He said that you'll be making 50,000 rupees a month. This is the reality. So don't go there. Don't waste your money. Don't make all this displacement. Don't go to Kathmandu and then be disappointed to come back. Then the paperwork. It's been a long time that passports. You can get your machine-readable passports here in Nepal directly in what used to be the district. But all the other paperwork should be online, and this is what we're trying to do. We're bringing standardized insurance contracts. We try to bring that on a PDF format that can be filled on a platform and then sent back to the insurer. So we're trying to make the migrants or the aspiring migrants aware of everything, all the implications of migrations. We're trying to to support the government of Nepal in decentralize the services and bring them back where they're needed. We're trying to advise the government on what kind of services, because we're talking about what kind of value we're putting on these digital solutions. Well, this, of course, all the, what I call the panic button. So should something happen to a migrant, there are numbers. I would call it, that would be an application that would like people to develop. If you are abroad and you push on a button, and according to all that has been digitized, and because we know who you are, where you've been, who your employer is, we know that there is an issue, and then the embassy of Nepal in the destination country could move. So what are what is hindering this? Regulations, capacity more than anything. We need to help the Nepali government in the effort of capacity building.
Yeah, thank you, Giuseppe. So you show that mobile technology is a lot about data behind. It's a lot about sharing information, but also getting the information on board first of all, digitizing the information. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it sounds very promising and very positive in that field. I would like to pass the floor to Amuda and ask you the same. What are challenges you have been encountering, particularly, for instance, with NIDAR during implementation, or what are you working on to improve or to tackle these challenges?
I think it's already come up. I think we deal with the same issue of policies and regulations not being very intact in terms of information sharing in the cyberspace, and how do we look at that? So when we're talking about a very sensitive issue of gender-based violence, how is that perceived? And where does that information go? Who's going to look at that information? So there is a lot of issue of confidentiality and who's getting that information and what happens to that information too. And also, everything is so central in the capital too. So it's also like, how do we decentralize that? How do we ensure that even through technology, we are able to decentralize these point of contacts where we can have more immediate responses and all of that stuff. So one of the things when we launched Nidor was about who's going to respond, right? Because there are still not first responders who will be able to respond quickly and immediately. But a reporting tool, in the other hand, is supposed to do that. So there was also a lot of renaissance about what is going to happen with the information that I've provided, who's going to look at it, how long is it going to take? And this issue is so sensitive that when we launched it, a lot of people were like, oh, there is going to be immediately a first responder or a rescue system that's going to be in place. So while it's going to take time to get there, because we also will have to decentralize a lot of our systems and how we look at in policy making, regulation, in how this issue is looked at different levels. But with the new federal architecture that has been put in place, we're hopeful that hopefully this first responder system is going to be much more swift and faster. Now there is another apprehension about sharing this data online and what happens to it, because most of the community that we work with only engages in using mobile technology in terms of social media connection and all of that stuff. So what does it mean for me to share my information about violence, which is already so ostracized in the community, via a mobile phone, to this entity that claims that something is going to happen. So rather than a reporting tool, I think Nidor has gone through its own discourse of development and progress. Right now, it's an information-seeking tool. So there are information you can seek through. So if this happens to me, what are the laws, regulations, who can I talk to about this? What can I do about this? Because for us to promise that to the public, there also needs to be parallel development of systems and structures in the government, in the protection bodies, where there are responses that are provided in due time. And when that doesn't happen, now people will start losing faith over the app too. So we had to revamp and restructure how we actually launched this and implemented this as well. So definitely, there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of policies, regulations. How do we track these data? Who maintains these data? Who's going to take care of this data? Is it going to be the government? Is it going to be some international agencies or local CBOs? Or who's going to look after this? And there is a lot of dialogue that's happening around that as well, because these are human data that are quite sensitive. And how do we look at that? It has been one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you.